In this lesson, we're going to look at number types. Our objectives are to understand what an integer is, to understand what a decimal is and their names, and to understand what a fraction is. Our vocabulary is an integer, positive and negative numbers that are not decimals or fractions. We also include 0 with the integers. Decimal, fraction where place values deal with powers of 10. And a fraction, a part divided by the whole. First thing that we want to look at is a diagram of the types of numbers. The first type of number, we're going to work from the small one out. The first type of number is what we call the counting numbers. Counting numbers are what you count by. If you were asked to count, you would typically start at 1, then go to 2, and 3, and so on. Our next group of numbers is what we call whole numbers. Now the whole numbers are around the counting numbers because counting numbers are whole numbers. And then what we do is we add some numbers in with the counting numbers. We actually only add one number in for the whole numbers, and that's 0. So our counting numbers are 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. Our whole numbers are 0 plus all those counting numbers. After whole numbers, we add some more numbers in with it. And what those are called are the integers. Now the integers include whole numbers and counting. So a whole number is also an integer. A counting number is also an integer. But then we add in the negative counting numbers, such as -1, -2, -3, and so on. Our next group here is what we call rational numbers. Rational means that they can be made into a ratio. Ratios are another way of saying fractions. So what we have here are fractions such as 1/4, 1/3, 2/3. We also have our mixed numbers, 3 1/2. We also have impropers, 5/2. We have negative versions of all of these. The other thing with rationals is decimals can a lot of times be rational. So any decimal that stops, such as -6.4, notice the decimal places stop. That's considered rational. Any decimal that repeats forever, that's also considered rational, such as -2.3, where the 3 repeats forever. That would also be rational. So this is one side of the number diagram. Then there's another separate side over here, which are called irrational numbers. These numbers cannot be made into fractions. So these are decimals that never stop. Some very common ones are things like the square root of 2, which if you type that into a calculator, you get a decimal that goes forever. It never stops. And then pi is another very common one. 3.14 is a rounded version we use for pi. It actually goes on forever. So now we just want to look at our 3 main types that we're going to deal with. First is integers. Integers for our purposes start with 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on, and that continues. But then, with those, these are actually the counting numbers. They're part of integers. With those, we add in the number 0. 0 is a very important number to us. It's also considered an integer. And then we add into that all our negative counting numbers. So our opposites of these black numbers here, 1, 2, 3, 4, we have our opposites. Notice there's no decimals or fractions here. The word integer basically, for our purposes, means that these all have denominators of 1. We can divide them all by 1 and they stay exactly the same. Next we want to look at decimals. So here I have 3 decimals. The main thing with a decimal is that we have place values after the decimal point. Now these place values are what help us with the name. So I want us to focus on the name. It will help us understand the decimal. So what we have here is the number in front of the decimal. We always just typically use our regular numbers. So we have 4 here. Here we have negative 24. Here we don't have a number in front, so nothing with that. Then, when we hit the decimal place, we always use the word and. Since we don't have a decimal, or we don't have a number in front, we don't need the word and for this decimal point. In this one, then what we do is we focus on the last place. So here, the 6 is in the last place. There's 1, 2 decimal spots. So this one's called tens, this is hundreds, and then thousands, 10,000s. It just keeps going. Basically, you can think about it, this place value, if you put a 1 in front of it, would be 10. If we put a 1 in front of this, it'd be 100. 1 in front of, and so on as we go. So here, this would be hundreds. So what we do is we look at this number as 6, 0, 6 is 6, and 6, and then we say, okay, this is the 100 spot, so it would be hundredths. We put a THS at the end, so 6 hundredths. This one, we have a 3, and then this would be the first place value, which is tenths. Notice 10 THS. This one, the number is 32. And the place value, well, if we put a 1 here, we have 0, 0, 0, 0. So this would be 10,000ths. So we have 32 10,000ths. Last are fractions, and the main thing we're going to look at with fractions is just what they look like. So what I call a basic fraction is what we're typically used to. So a smaller number on top, bigger number on bottom. Now all fractions can also be negative. So we'll look at negative, well, we've got 2 over 3. Smaller on top, bigger on bottom, negative out in front. The negative sign can also be with the top number, but we never put it with the bottom number. Mixed numbers are when we have the whole number out in front, such as 2 and 1/2. The basic fraction next to it. So what this is saying is we have 2 wholes and half of another whole. We can again have negatives of this. Negative 4 and 1/5. So again, negative goes right in front. Improper fractions are where the top number is bigger than the bottom number, such as 5 over 2. And again, we can write this with a negative. We could have negative 8 over 5. And again, the negative can go at the top or out in front. We don't put it with the bottom. Okay, if there were any questions over this, please ask them within class. If you need to just watch something again to get some more help, rewind, rewatch, whatever you need to do. Thank you.